It is 11:30, time for Detroit's only nightly political talk show. We thank you for joining us here on The Pulse. I'm Ruparaj. You know, a lot going on as always, so get out of that social media echo chamber and just hang out with us for a bit while we break it all down for you. You know, part of what's driving the news cycle is the avalanche of executive orders by the president. In fact, today marks just 1 month while he's been in office, and he's already signed 68 of these executive orders. We're going by the numbers here on The Pulse to show you how that And, you know, there's a lot of stuff that can be confusing out there, so we're taking your questions right to an attorney to try to clear things up for you. Well, we begin tonight with the latest in the battle between President Trump and Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. As the war between Russia and Ukraine rages on, the war of words rages on, too. A news conference scheduled with Zelensky and Trump's Ukrainian envoy has been canceled and changed to just a photo op. Ukraine says the move was requested by the United States. Zelensky has been frustrated after Russia and the U.S. started talks about how to end the war without Ukraine at the table. He said his country will not go along with any decision if Ukraine isn't involved in the talks. That's just one of the big stories we're covering tonight. A lot is happening right now at this hour, so let's fly through some of our big stories in the world of politics tonight that affects all of us. Starting in the Senate, where President Donald Trump's pick for FBI director was narrowly confirmed. We're talking about Kash Patel. It was a 51-49 vote. Senators Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski were the two Republican holdouts. Patel is a Trump loyalist who's blasted the FBI in the past and has said he wants major changes to the organization, including a smaller Washington footprint, and for the agency to focus more on crime fighting than intelligence gathering. He also said before he was nominated that he would go after the people he calls anti-Trump conspirators in both the federal government and the media. During his hearings, he denied having a so-called enemies list. Now to this story impacting migrant children in this country. Some of them are in immigration court without representation tonight because the Trump administration suspended a legal aid program for them. Now this impacts kids who came into the U.S. without a parent or a guardian. The Interior Department didn't give an explanation for the stop work order. One attorney in California, though, says she represents children as young as 2. Now let's come closer to home, to the state capitol, where lawmakers reached a deal on a new tipped wage law. This is pretty big. It keeps tipped wages intact while also capping it at 50% of the minimum wage, which lawmakers say will help small businesses. Still, though, some business owners are worried about the impact it will have.
Kind of up in the air right now as to how we're going to move forward with our wait staff. Paying minimum wage to every staff member instead of the tipped credit wage is going to make it, it's going to make it almost impossible.
Here's the deal. Something the deal does not include: a resolution on paid sick time. The bill is now headed to Governor Whitmer's desk. Major news to tell you about this hour about President Donald Trump's push to purge federal workers. You remember this? A judge is refusing to block the administration's mass layoffs while a lawsuit by 5 unions moves forward. The unions represent hundreds of thousands of workers who say the efforts go against Congress's power to shape the size and direction of those agencies through funding decisions. Now, attorneys for the Trump administration say the unions didn't show they faced irreparable and immediate harm if the layoffs aren't stopped. That as the president's lawyers consider starting a fight to overturn a 90-year-old Supreme Court decision that says a president cannot fire appointed leaders of agencies without cause. We're talking about the ruling known as Humphrey's executor. This dates back all the way to 1935 when a man named William Humphrey was the head of the Federal Trade Commission after that was being appointed by Calvin Coolidge. Franklin Roosevelt at that point wanted his own guy in there, so he asked Humphrey to get out. He asked him to resign. When he refused, Roosevelt fired him. And then Humphrey died the next year. His estate sued for payback, and they won, with the justices saying FDR's action was simply improper. Now, in the unanimous ruling, the justices said, in part, this: "For it is quite evident that one who holds his office only during the pleasure of another cannot be depended upon to maintain an attitude of independence against the latter's will." But recently, some conservative legal theorists say the ruling is wrong. Here's what they argue. They say the federal agencies are part of the executive branch and answer to the government, so the president can fire them at will. And get this, a National Labor Relations Board member was fired by Trump last month. She's suing to get her job back right now, and that case could be a test of this 90-year-old ruling. Stay tuned, a lot more to come on this. You know, from the Supreme Court now to Capitol Hill, major news involving a mainstay in the Senate. Republican Senator Mitch McConnell announcing he won't seek re-election next year. The Kentucky senator is the longest-serving Senate party leader in history and was first elected in 1984. The senator sharing the news on his birthday today. He's 83 years old. He's had several health concerns over the last few years, including injuries from falls and times where his face briefly froze while he was talking in front of a podium. McConnell talking about his decision on the Senate floor today, saying the job of the Senate is critical.
This chamber is still the haven where the political minority can require debate. It's still the crucible in which jurists are tested for their fidelity to upholding the Constitution and laws as they were written. The Senate is still equipped for work of great consequence. And to the disappointment of my critics, I'm still here on the job.
Now, McConnell passed the baton to South Dakota Senator John Thune, who's now serving as the Senate Majority Leader. He plans to retire when his current term ends. All right, now to something that's become a familiar scene since the president returned to office, the signing of executive orders. He's only been in office a month, as we mentioned, but he's already signed more than 6 of these executive orders, and it's a lot to keep up with. But we like to dive deeper on the pulse on all topics, and so we wanted to see how this compares to the first year of past presidents. So it's time now to go by the numbers. Take a look. These are the first-year executive orders going back to George W. Bush. President Biden had the most in his first year with 75, but look at the other numbers here. At that rate President Trump is going, it looks like he'll surpass that very quickly. You know, he's already passed his first term total where he had 55 that first year. President Obama, right over here, as you see, had 40, and President Bush had 54. All right, now let's take a look at totals for recent presidents and throw out the Trump term because it's obviously incomplete right now. President Biden actually had the least number of executive orders in his term with 162. President Trump had 220. And then keep in mind these last 3 served 2 terms in office. President Obama with 277, President Bush with 291, and President Clinton signed 364 executive orders through his 8 years in the Oval Office. So now you might be wondering who had the most executive orders in history. We have the answer for you. Franklin D. Roosevelt with more than 3,700 executive orders. That number will be hard to top since he served a little more than 12 years in office. Woodrow Wilson had the second most with a little more than 1,800, as you see over here. Calvin Coolidge had roughly 1,200 executive orders, and then Theodore Roosevelt and Herbert Hoover both had just over 1,000, as you see over here, 1,081 and then 1,003. But no matter who's in office, it's always a lot to unpack, and you may have a lot of questions. That's why we're taking your questions about the Trump presidency, maybe the confirmation process for his cabinet, his handling of the Russia-Ukraine or Israel-Hamas wars, or just politics in general, right to the experts. Oakland University political science professor Dave Dulio will be in Studio C tomorrow night. If you want your question answered, send us an email to thepulse@fox.com. You can also scan the QR code on your screen to auto-launch your email on your phone. You can also hit me up on social media. Here's the deal. We look forward to hearing from you. As we always say, the show is about you. This is truly about questions. I know you have a lot of comments as well. Love to hear from you, but if you have questions, hit us up for tomorrow's conversation. Well, tonight, we're revisiting our conversation about addressing a crisis impacting far too many people, not only in Metro Detroit, but across the country. We're talking about unhoused people. There are several resources that we really want to pass along so that anyone who doesn't have a home, whether it's someone you know, someone you see out on the street, someone you just met, we want to make sure that you're aware of all of the resources. Last night on The Pulse, we spoke with Mario Kelly, a Detroit businessman and activist who actually lived on the streets at one point himself. He went back and lived on the streets for 48 hours to see what people are going through now and said, we as a country, we have to do better.
No shelters. The shelters that we do have They're unsafe. They're not clean. We have programs like Wayne Metro or CAM that I called on a regular basis that they told me they were either full or to call back. So that's happening on a daily basis here in the city of Detroit.
And I want to point out that there are safe places for people to go to as well. I know you're saying that your experience was like that, but we know that there are places. If someone right now is watching this and they need a place to go, there are shelters. We don't want anyone freezing out in the cold.
Yes.
But you're saying we can do better as a society. What do you think needs to happen in order to fix this? And I mean, I don't want to just say throw money at it and make it a legislative issue with politics, but do you think from a city, state, and federal level, more can be done, and what do you think that is?
Affordable housing. I feel like there's a lot of abandoned buildings. There's a lot of abandoned houses in the city of Detroit. We need funding from the federal, state, and local level to be able to get some of this affordable housing. I remember they had something called the CVI bill where they use local groups to help the violence, and the violence has went down 25% in those areas. Why can't we do that for our homelessness? Allocate funds for those local businesses to help the homeless people in their area.
And that's something echoed by two other activists, businessman Hill Harper and marketing and comm specialist Shar Yates, saying, simply put, you never know what someone else is going through, and you never know when you might need help of your own.
Right now, so many people are using our motel system and cars when they can. So they'll sleep in their cars for days and days and days. They'll go into a motel for one night, try to wash things, try to take a shower and clean up, then back in the car. And when they have enough money to spend one night in a hotel, they will. It's heartbreaking, and it shouldn't be this way. And we have to do better, and we should do better. And everyone, our politicians, our city officials, our county officials have to look in the mirror. Our state officials and federal have to look in the mirror and say, where are our resources going for American citizens that need help? We are only as good as the least among us, and we have to lift folks up and provide a safety net.
You never know what your circumstances, things might change on you that you have no control over, but you have to persevere. And most importantly, you have to ask for help. Everyone needs help at some point in time in their life. No matter if it's big or small, we've all asked someone to help us. And we can't be afraid to ask for help. That has nothing to do with, you being a needy person or whatnot. We all need help.
Right now, I want you to take a look at the screen behind me because there are several resources for people who are experiencing homelessness. Pause your DVR, your stream, whatever it is, screenshot it, take a picture on your phone. Make sure you get these resources. It's so important to this conversation, and we want you to watch that whole show if you can. You can scan the QR code on the bottom right of your screen. Most importantly, no matter where you are, help is available. And remember this, if you see someone out on the streets, they don't have a phone or a television to watch this. So maybe you write these numbers down, keep them in the glove box, and you see someone, you say, hey, may I make a call for you and get you the help that you need? We all have to do our part. Right after the break, one of the president's biggest promises is addressing the border, and there are so many questions about how he wants to do it and what's legal, what's not. We're getting some of your questions, and we're having an attorney answer those questions right here in Studio C. You're watching The Pulse on Fox 2. Back now on The Pulse, looking at all things people, power, and politics from the D to D.C. And everything that happens in D.C. affects us here in the D. And joining us now to talk about the president's immigration policy and answering your questions, attorney Elias Muawad. It's always good to see you, Elias. Thanks for joining us.
Nice to see you.
Great to see you.
My pleasure.
So much is going on in the world of immigration. And as an attorney, I'm sure you are paying close attention. Let's begin with the news of the day, the undocumented children who would face immigration court. Right now, there's been some funding cuts, and because of that, a lot of the representation's at risk. What does this mean?
Well, I think it violates the 14th Amendment and some of the law espoused under the Immigration Act. These kids need to be represented, in my opinion, with a guardian ad litem, somebody who's going to be their voice. So the cuts really do hurt the kids, because when you have somebody that can communicate with these kids as if you're the parent, you're going to learn a lot about them. You're going to be able to report back to an administrative law judge in immigration court what they're all about. Plus, hopefully you can find where their family is, hopefully in the United States. So I don't think that's the answer for these kids.
Let's talk about some of the viewers, our good Pulse viewers who are watching. We always say this show is about you. We don't just say it, we mean it. In fact, we want your questions, and we're going to answer them right here on the show. Angela, thank you for writing in. What actual rights do these illegals have? They aren't citizens, especially the criminals. And I think you got to kind of split this up, I would imagine. And Angela, thank you for your question.
Right.
We have people who are here who are undocumented, who are criminals, or MS-13 gang members, or other people who are pushing fentanyl.
Right.
Let's begin there. What rights do they have, and what rights do they have?
So I don't think in the court of public opinion anybody's going to cry about people that are criminals. They want them out of here. We want them out of here. That's the public opinion. It's the next tier. The next tier are people that don't have papers, such as an HB1 visa, such as a permanent residency, or some type of documents that they're a temporary citizen of the United States going to citizenship. What do you do with those guys? You have to understand something. The people that came across the border came across because of the presidency, and they allowed it, and there's nothing anybody can do about it, but it's not their fault. And you can't blame them for coming over here and being allowed to come in and then say, get out of here. There has to be a system, a due process system under the 14th Amendment, and there's laws under the Immigration Act that protects them.
I think it's really safe to say, whether you're a Democrat, we've had from Debbie Dingell to Haley Stevens to Alyssa Slotkin, the senator, no one is saying, hey, we think it's a great idea for people who are committing crimes to be protected and housed and taken care of here.
Right.
Everybody is on board with that, but it's this other group of people. That's a pretty large number of people who are here, again, undocumented. And in Southwest Detroit, so many of them are afraid to go get help after their homes were flooded out. That's the concern that many attorneys have right now, right?
I have clients that are afraid that either from some of the Spanish countries or Mexico, Venezuela, whatever, they don't know what's going to happen to them. I have a client that was just arrested. He had no papers, and they found him on a traffic stop, just a traffic ticket, and they stopped him, and nothing, and they took him into immigration. So there has to be legislation. There has to be a quick legislation to resolve these out, and both sides of the aisle have to work it out.
They got to.
There's nothing on the books right now on how they really want to do it. The administrative orders by President Trump are in conflict with the 14th Amendment and the Immigration Act. And there's a lot of lawsuits right now.
And so much is caught up in court. Charlene, you have a question here on the Pulse. Thanks for writing in, Charlene. Let's see what you have to ask here. I feel Trump and his team are only targeting one particular group instead of all illegals. And there are people of different colors, creeds, and they're here right now saying, hey, they're not coming after me. Is this a direct let's go after only those who are Mexican-American?
Absolutely not. And I've got clients that I represent in criminal matters, and they're not permanent citizens, or they have issues, and they're from the Middle East, they're Chinese, etc. No, this is across the board. They're not just targeting the Hispanic community. The Hispanic community is large, so the public thinks that that's what's going on. But I can tell you, representing other people that have immigration issues, they are not Hispanic, and they're going through immigration issues and probably getting deported. And I want to say something to the public right now. If you have immigration documentation and you're not a citizen yet, don't go out there and commit a crime. You got to be careful. You shouldn't commit a crime anyway.
No.
But don't go out there, because you are most likely, in today's world, going to get deported.
There's no mercy.
There is no mercy.
There's no excuse at that point.
No, there's not.
Okay, Mary West, you have a question as well. She says, one question, what took so long to get this going? Guess it took the right people. Thank God for November 5th. This has become a highly political issue. What took so long? Look, this country has always been so split politically, and even policy-wise. We know that Kamala Harris and President Biden, when they got into office, they reversed a number of orders that Trump had in play. And it was like the floodgates were open, and now we know the border crossings are down. So we've seen a difference.
So it is obviously the different administration that's here. It's what he ran on. It's what the public voted him on, at least the majority of it. I'm not sure if everybody understands well enough the issues concerning children, concerning parents, concerning families. And you have to balance between the 14th Amendment and the Immigration Act, and then what Trump wants. Again, you've got his administrative orders battling, and you know how many lawsuits there are now? If you go and research this, there are plenty of lawsuits attacking a lot of his administrative orders regarding immigration.
And you also have to really separate the criminals from people who are, yes, here undocumented, but haven't done anything wrong outside of trying to escape another country and come here. Eli, good to see you. Thank you for your time. Come back again and answer some more questions.
Anytime.
We love to have you. We're turning the spotlight back on you after the break, opening the Pulse mailbox, what some of you had to ask and say coming up, including why are eggs still so expensive? We have an answer next. It is People, Power, and Politics. Welcome back to Detroit's only nightly political talk show. As we always say, this show is built around you, and when we say it, we really mean it. So tonight, we're opening the Pulse mailbox, taking a look at some of what you had to ask and what you had to say. We'll begin with Harry. He wrote into the Pulse asking this. Let's take a look. He says, hey, I love the show. I feel like you show both sides. And he goes on to talk about the Pulse. He says, though, my question is to do with the price of eggs. If the price went up because of an egg shortage, why can I find eggs in every store I go if I'm willing to pay their price? Define shortage. Harry, thanks for your comment and your question. Here's the deal. When it comes to eggs, we went shopping for answers. Here's the bottom line. The bird flu outbreak and the new regulations on cage-free requirements, they put a real strain on retailers. And yes, grocery store executives say that's one reason they cost a little bit more. Why can you still find them? Well, larger grocers have a network of suppliers across the country that allows to grab up stock quickly. You may notice some of the smaller stores actually have a tougher time. Then this shift towards cage-free egg production you heard about may have somewhat of an impact too. Farming experts say certain farms may be more vulnerable to bird flu outbreaks depending on how close the birds are living together. And that is part of the reason that you can still find them, and they're also costing a bit more. Harry, thank you for your question. Ronald wrote into the Pulse, and Ronald, we thank you for your email. Good evening, Rube. They're overreaching into all aspects of the government systems to help people. Elon Musk should not be allowed to be an employee of the United States at this capacity due to the fact he is not an American citizen. Ronald, we thank you for your email, but here's the deal. Elon Musk is an American citizen. He became a citizen back in 2002, and he is a special government employee, or an SGE. There have been thousands of them since 1962 when they first started. Now, one more thing about DOGE. This was actually a rebrand on a department that then President Barack Obama opened in 2014. It was called the United States Digital Service. It was meant to deliver better government services to the American people through technology and design. So what happened here? President Trump didn't just start a new department called DOGE. He renamed Obama's department and gave it a new mission to root out inefficiency. And finally, we have another one here that we have time for. This is from Richard. It appears one of the questions being addressed on the Pulse is the access by DOGE to everyone's data and personal information. He says, let's be honest, even our credit rating agencies and many private companies, as well as the federal government, have exposed our private data. How many pieces of mail had you received every year about third-party companies providing identity monitoring service because a company's data was breached? Where is the FTC, FCC, and Michigan AG, the Attorney General, about attacking this issue? Richard, thanks for your comment. You know, we had Brent Yaks, a cyber expert, on our show this past week who told us there are many more government employees who have their hands on our information than we even realize. He pointed out that many DOGE employees have been given high security clearance to see where money is being spent, but it is in a read-only capacity. That means they can't alter or change anything, but rather see what's there and then suggest audits accordingly. As for people's data being breached, the attorneys general across the country, FTC and FCC that you talk about here, they all take those complaints seriously. It's what they do from 9 to 5. It's the attorney general's job to look at those complaints and hold these companies who violate our privacy accountable. And you should contact them if you feel like your information is at risk. That is the Pulse for tonight. A reminder, we're taking your political questions to Oakland University political science professor Dave Dulio on the Pulse tomorrow night. Send your question to thepulse@fox.com or scan the QR code on the screen to auto-launch your email. We look forward to hearing from you. I'm Ruth Barrage. Thanks for joining us as usual. Have a good night.